Welcome to Logical-NDE. My name is Emily, and it is my pleasure to narrate the near-death experiences of those who have seen the other side. If you are new to our channel, welcome. For our regular viewers, please sit back and enjoy today's episode.
I'm Cathy Fisher, and I'm here to talk about a near-death experience that I had, or as I prefer to call it, a temporary death experience, because I did actually pass rather than coming near death. Now, that's a term that I sort of stole off of the internet, so I can't claim it as my own, but I prefer it to near-death experience. But for the most part, I will use that other term because it's the accepted term. So when I was 21 years old, I had pneumonia. Now, this was over 40 years ago. I am now in my early 60s. In that experience, I was at home, living at home. I was a college student, but living in my parents' home just very temporarily. And I had contracted pneumonia, and I was very ill, but I didn't know how sick I really was. And what ended up happening was I was trying to fall asleep and felt sleep coming on me. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when I was ill, it just kind of felt so bad it's almost like death is working in your cells. I don't know if you've ever been that ill. But I had no expectations of dying. Well, one afternoon, I felt like it was time for me to fall asleep. It was really hard for me to stay awake at all. And as I felt myself drifting off, I got really relaxed in a greater way than usual, and I felt myself falling into a place where it was like there was no pain. Everything was just relaxing, and it felt so wonderful. And I thought, this is going to be a really good sleep. Well, as I was drifting off, or so I thought, all my pain started leaving, and then I realized that I felt as if I was rising up, as if I was leaving my body. Sometimes you feel that way when you fall asleep. But after just a little bit of that, I realized I really am having this sensation of leaving, and I'm having no pain. And then I kind of looked down, and I saw my body on the bed, looking as if I was asleep, and I realized, oh my gosh, I am dying. This is it. I'm going. And I was surprised, but didn't feel worried or anxious about it. But it's like, oh my, I'm actually going. So I started drifting what felt like up, and all the pain left me, and I felt so peaceful. And I felt myself entering what a lot of people have described as a tunnel. And while I kind of concur with that notion of a tunnel, it felt round, but it felt almost infinite, yet somehow kind of cozy. And I started going really fast. Now, it's not like a physical feeling of going really fast like you have here on Earth when you're in a car or something, but I knew I was going fast. And I was very aware of everything around me, like I could see all around me at once, and yet knew I was moving forward. And all of a sudden, these lights started passing me. It was almost like one at a time, a couple at a time. They were kind of spaced apart, but they were coming. And as I started to experience that, I realized that these lights were people or spirits of people who had passed, or some type of being. And I felt a familiarity with them, as if they were ancestors of mine, or maybe people that I had known who had passed, although I didn't really recognize any of them individually at that moment, but I was going really fast. And I have no sense of time, no idea how long this took, but I found myself getting to a beautiful, brilliant light. Now, unlike when you see with your physical eyes, this light was like white, but a color of white I've never seen on this earth. It's like a total spectrum white. And it was so brilliant, but so warm and so beautiful. And the closer I got, the more peace I felt, and the more totally surrounded and infused with love. It was the most amazing experience, and I wish I could describe it, but I can't even come close. But I knew that this was what I would call God. People have different names for it, but for simplicity, I want to say God. And I felt the presence of God as being something that was so far past anything I had ever comprehended in my life, and infusing everything and every being around me, including myself. And when I got to a place where I guess I would say I'm in front of this light or before this light, and yet a little bit a part of it, but most of it seemed to be in front of me, I heard a voice say to me, "It's not your time, you'll be going back." And I had already perceived that and knew that to be true. And so that was just confirming what I knew. And at the same time, I'm like, wow, it sure would be nice to stay, but yeah, it's not my time. So I was very accepting of that. Now, when I say I heard a voice, it is unlike what you hear now. It's really done telepathically. And it's sort of a cross between your imagination and when you hear your own voice when you're reading a book or something. But I did hear a voice that was not just mine, that spoke to me, and I recognized that voice as being the voice of Spirit or the voice of God. In the time that I was there, I have never experienced so much love and acceptance and oneness with that entity and with everything around me in my life. The closest I would ever come that I had noticed before was a deep state of meditation where everything was beautiful like that. But this far surpassed that experience. While I was there, I received a lot of things, which I can't definitely say, oh, it was this, and this, in terms of remembering it. But I know I was receiving some type of information, some type of skill, some type of stuff that would be useful for me someday. And I don't even know if I've unpacked all of that yet. But I don't remember any specific instructions being given in that voice. It was just like the sun is shining on you, you're soaking up those beautiful rays, and in those rays are everything that you need. So I don't know how long I spent there, but I realized when it was time to go back, and I started to go back. And again, this is hard to describe, so I started again going backwards, but yet you can see all around you, so you know you're going backwards. So I'm going backwards again very quickly, again passing lights and other beings and other presences. I now recognize those not only as people who had gone on before me, some of whom I'm sure were ancestors, but probably some other spirits, guides, certainly angelic beings were present. And I came back exactly the way I went, so it seemed, and it was so fast. And when I re-entered a certain point, I kind of thudded back into my body. Now, it didn't quite hurt, but there was something about it that registered a level of almost pain, discomfort maybe, but there was a definite like thud to get back into the body. And when that happened, it was a little bit jolting, not extremely painful, but at that point, pain started entering back into my body, the pain that I had left when I left this plane. So the pain started entering back, but I had had an experience so amazingly profound, and I knew that. I noticed that my body felt chilly, very chilly, and a little bit stiff. Based on what I have read, that might indicate to me that it was possible I was gone 2 to 4 hours. But I really couldn't tell you how long I was gone. In some ways, it felt like seconds, and in other ways, it could have been just an eternal amount of time because of how much I got out of it. So I returned. I was back in my body. The pain kind of seeped back in. I didn't have as much pain as I had before, but I still had pain. And I was still ill. I felt a little better. However, I got well amazingly quickly after that. I would say in about a week. And then at the end of that week or so, I had a pretty miraculous ending to that illness. I went to a church that I had been going to for a long time. And there was a woman there with an amazing ministry of healing. And she actually heals people sometimes when the music played from her organ or piano when she played. And that's exactly what happened to me. I sat there and I had been coughing, and I was staying away from people even though I knew I was no longer contagious. But all of a sudden, I felt like everything rose up in me, and the pneumonia just kind of like rose up out of my lungs and left me, and I was fine from that point on. It was as if I'd never had the pneumonia other than the memory. It was an amazing thing. That experience of having died and come back was so deeply profound that I didn't talk about it. I don't mean that I was scared to talk about it. I wasn't even scared. It was just so profound. I didn't know what to say, even to myself, much less to somebody else. So I didn't say anything for the longest time. But it was a situation where I knew it wasn't a dream. It was so real, and so many things were going on with me internally after that I knew this was reality that I had experienced. It's one of those I know that I know that I know situations. Of course, I can't prove it. And there are often people who want me to have some type of proof, some type of documentation. Well, I don't have it. I was at home, and I was not expecting to die. I was actually quite surprised. So apparently I was sicker than I knew, and apparently it was not my time to stay on the other side. So I don't have any type of timing or anything like that. But when you experience something this deep, something this real, so connected in with spirit, you yourself you don't need proof. The experience is proof in and of itself. So a lot of things changed after that. In some ways, I felt less comfortable here on the physical plane because I knew where home really was. On the other hand, I felt more comfortable here because I understood my purpose a little better. I understood more that I was here for a reason. And while I couldn't necessarily line out specifically exactly what I needed to do and how I needed to do it, I knew there was a purpose for me here. And I knew that purpose was to learn to, as best as I could, express that love that I experienced and to try to explain that, yes, this is real. What happens to us after we live on this earth, the afterlife, is absolutely real. Now, whether someone chooses to believe that or not, it's not up to me. But what I do know is that I can show that I care, I can show love to that person, and that's the really important thing. My experience with this left me with a greater understanding of God. It by far pressed outside of any boxes that I had for God, or even still could explain. So my experience deepened my faith in God. But I am less stuck on what individual beliefs I need to have, because it's about trusting that God more so than it is about what you believe. The main thing I want to say about God and the nature of God is, it is true. God really is love. And anything that we do in this life, whether it's actions, thoughts, or what we choose to do to help others, is measured by, is it love? So if you want to know if something comes from God or not, is it about love? If it is, then it probably does. It probably does come from God. But if it doesn't directly correspond with love and compassion and acceptance, then you're probably putting a little of your own stuff in there, or a little of something somebody else told you. So if you want to know if something that you believe is accurate or not, just measure it with love. If it doesn't match up to an unconditional love, it's probably not really from God. It may have twinges of things, but God really, really is love. And our job on this earth is to let people know that they are loved and they're cared about. And I'm not talking about a gushy type of, oh, I love you so much, da, 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 or any type of emotion. It's not an emotion. It's an action, and it's just a state of being where you care what happens to that person. You care about their well-being. Even if it's a person you don't particularly care for, and maybe you don't like at all their behaviors. Maybe their behaviors are very much against everything that makes sense to us spiritually or even as human beings. They might be someone who has killed people or someone who is cruel. You can still care what happens to that person and still love that person. And that also does not mean you have to be in their sphere of existence. You don't necessarily have to spend time in their presence to care about them. So there's so much that can be added in here. I had always been intuitive and had gifts that, for lack of a better word, were sort of like psychic gifts. Even as a child, I had sometimes seen spirits. I had on occasion seen an angel. In fact, there was one by my bed when I was about 5 years old. And I didn't know it was an angel. I just knew it was this really big guy that was even bigger than my dad, who was like 6'7", and he was wearing white. Now, I don't think that angels necessarily wear white, but I think the white was for me so that when I look back, I went, oh, maybe that was an angel. And this angel said to me, don't be afraid. Everything's okay. Just go back to sleep. And oddly, rather than being afraid, it really relaxed me. I just completely went, oh, okay. And I kind of closed my eyes and put the covers up over my head and looked back down, and he was gone. Never really thought about that much, because when you're 5 years old, these things happen to you or happen in your mind, and you don't logically think about, well, what is this and what does this mean? I think I was probably in my late teens before I looked back at that experience and really remembered it fully and went, wow, that must have been an angel. And somebody else suggested maybe it was a guide, but I feel really certain this was an angel. Anyway, some of these intuitive gifts that I had included just kind of knowing things about people when I met them for no reason. And I often had a hard time with the fact that I knew things either that might happen or knew things about people, because I kept thinking, well, why do I know? Am I supposed to do anything with this? So sometimes this really bothered me. And on a religious level, having been brought up Christian, there had been some talk about, well, that's not a good thing. But what I found through this death experience is that this is just a gift that is a typical gift, and we all have it. We're just, some of us are a little more aware of it than others, but really all that it is, it's nothing unique. It's just connection to spirit. And we all have it in different ways, and some of us see it or feel it or have other ways of spirit reaching us. But this was one of the really prominent ones for me, was to sense things and to know things that I really didn't otherwise have a way of knowing. So what changed for me when I came back was not only were those gifts more heightened and a little more all-inclusive of a few other things, I was at peace with them because they no longer scared me in any way, or maybe scared is too strong of a word. I didn't worry about why I had them. And I began to understand that it's just spirit. But I also started to question more, okay, what do I do with this particular information? Am I supposed to do something with this? So now I measure that with the love. Sometimes you just know something because you know, and there's nothing to be done with it. But sometimes you know information so that you can perhaps change things or make things better. So I have just become more and more comfortable over time, but certainly starting then, with knowing and understanding that everything serves a purpose in your life and that everything's okay. Whatever you're experiencing is designed to give you an opportunity to come closer to God, to bring you to spirit. Now, please understand, I'm not saying in the typical way that people say, well, everything happens for a reason. Well, yeah, it does, but sometimes we use that to excuse behaviors or situations, or to really even indicate that God is some kind of a bully that's going to give you some awful situation just to teach you something. Well, let me tell you something. God is definitely not a bully. Definitely not. You may have situations that have come up in your life, and there may be a reason for them, but the reason is not as trite as you need to learn something. Because God is not cruel, God is love. Whatever we do experience, whether it seems random to us or not, can be brought into our life and woven into our understanding to where it will serve a purpose, both for us and for others. But it wasn't there just to teach us a trite lesson, because God's not a bully. I'm hoping that this is helpful for somebody. God is real. This life is real, and what happens to us afterwards is very, very real. And it's so much more complete than anything we can experience here. And it's so much more beautiful than can be described. It is so much more full. You remain yourself, and yet you're very much one and a part of everything in a way that is hard to experience here. I never was afraid to die before particularly, but I'm definitely not afraid to die now. I will look forward to the day when I pass and go to the other side and stay. But for now, I'm still learning to love. I'm still learning how to carry that out. I am still learning how to be accepting of everybody where they are, to the degree that it's really not even our job to have an opinion about people, their lives, or what's going on. And it's a little tricky sometimes. But when you experience something as deep as having died and come back, it's a little easier to let that just be what it is. Well, I hope this is helping somebody. Again, my name is Cathy Fisher. It's spelled with a C, and Fisher is just like going fishing. I do have a Facebook page with my picture on it, but I don't typically tend to friend people that I don't know. But if you find me on Messenger, you're welcome to message me. I'm going to try and do a Facebook page just specific to this situation, and I think I'm going to call it Cathy's near-death experience / near-death or temporary death experience, and I'm hoping to have that up soon so that we can have an exchange. And that's because the one podcast I was on, I had several requests for information or for an exchange about things like forgiveness or something like that. And I'm certainly open to doing that, but I want to do it in a forum where I actually have time. So if that's something I can share with multiple people at once, that's what I want to do. So be looking for that. Hopefully I will do that. Nothing for sale, no books, nothing like that. I just want to share my experience and want to share the fact that love is real. And we just need to step into that and be that love. We just need to be God's hands and feet with skin on. And the more we experience God in our lives now, the more we do that well. Certainly having a near-death experience is an incredible jump start for that. But that's not everybody's path. It was mine. And I'm of the opinion that maybe I needed that a little more because I'm a little more dense than some people. But anyway, I hope this finds you well. I hope that this touches your heart. I hope that you feel the reality of this love from this experience. And I wish you well, and I hope to hear from some of you. And God bless each and every one of us, and thank you so much.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.